I Conquer the Conqueror novel audiobook. Chapter 1 to Chapter 5. Natalie steadied herself. There was the sound of water emanating from the washroom. The flush on her face juxtaposed against the blankness in her eyes as she spaced out toward the ceiling. She sat up only when she heard the washroom door opened. The woman tilted to feel the stretch on her neck as she put on the coquettish smile that she had always worn. You ray too much, Mr. Hoffman. You didn't even give me a heads up before coming over in the middle of the night. A hint of indignation was discernible in her inflection. Sebastian was drying off his hair with a towel. His bathrobe was parted slightly at the front, providing a glimpse of the chiseled torso hidden underneath. He lifted his head to regard the woman when he heard her speak. This woman is getting better at this. After a year together. Does she really think I am still unaware that she has been putting on an act all this while? The man curled his lips and decided against exposing her. He then spoke calmly in a low voice. I'll be more gentle next time. He threw the towel onto the bed and retrieved a pair of dress pants from the closet before he disrobed. Mr. Hoffman, we haven't seen each other since you left on the 3rd last month. Natalie stepped away from the bed and slipped her arms around him from behind. Why are you in such a hurry to leave when we've only been here for less than an hour? She then put on a well-practiced pout. Since you'll be flying off tomorrow, won't you stay a while longer? You know I've really missed you. Sebastian seized the woman's wayward hands and turned her around to pin her against the closet. His incisive eyes traced the contours from her vampish cheeks down to her flawless curves. Not only was she physically exquisite, but she was also able to read his mind well. Despite being with him for so long, she still managed to find ways to please him and keep him intrigued. He propped up her chin. How long have we been together, Natalie? Coming to a year, I reckon. A sparkle glinted in her eyes and vanished as swiftly as it appeared. Why are you asking, Mr. Hoffman? Have you grown weary of me? The woman thought she had veiled her emotions well and was not aware that the man had already caught on. I'll send my assistant to you when we're done. Sebastian did not give her a straight answer. He retrieved his wallet from his pocket and pulled out a check which he had prepared beforehand. The corners of Natalie's lips raised slightly when she received it. Thank you so much, Mr. Hoffman. She paid no heed to the figures written on the draft, only planting a kiss on it like a gold digger before placing it on the vanity. The woman then strolled right past the man unclad and straight into the washroom. Natalie filled the tub and soaked herself inside before she vaguely heard the door to the room closed shut. As she leaned back in the bath with her eyes closed, she meditated upon Sebastian's enigmatic words. It was almost a year to the day that she put his name to that agreement. Is this goodbye? That would be exactly what she wanted. She had come to her senses after nearly jumping to her death in response to the double betrayal she suffered 1 year ago. There was no reason why she had to kill herself. She ought to live on and latch herself onto powerful men who could enable her to enact her revenge on those who had wronged her. However, she had no luck uncovering the identity of her mother as murderer so far. Since the time she started out with Sebastian, she had been emotionally distancing herself from him as she learned that he was not the easiest person to get along with. If not for the contractual agreement she signed with him, she would have packed it in a long time ago. When she was done freshening up, she went straight back to bed. She ignored the strain in her body from that strenuous late-night workout she had when the alarm went off the next day. It took her only half an hour to prepare before she headed out. A year ago, she had found employment with K2 TV through Sebastian's back channels. But she was no floozy either. Armed with her outstanding physical attributes and canny wit, she had rapidly found fame as a top show host through the 2 variety shows she anchored. She had to be in early this morning to receive her guests at the station and reckoned that the filming for the program may end late. On the way there, she unlocked her phone to see an unread message from Zoe in the form of a video. The timestamp on the video indicated that it came in around 3 in the morning, which was around when Sebastian left her place for Peloria Gardens. In the basement parking lot, a young woman alighted from a car before entering the elevator alongside a man. It looked as though the two were together. Natalie chuckled ironically to herself at how the notion of Sebastian being bored with her became more than a figment of her own imagination. She thought the woman from the clip looked very much like Nova Sniddle, a starlet who had been exceedingly popular of late. Nova had been a guest on one of her shows previously. From that experience, she had personally found the young woman to be somewhat pretentious and lacking in social graces. She wondered what had gotten into Sebastian to account for this change in taste. On a personal level, she did not much care about what kinds of women he fancied now, so long as he was prepared to chuck her aside. She was rather looking forward to his assistant coming to her. Just thinking about the good days ahead after her release from her contractual obligations put her in a fine mood. Upon arrival, she was spotted by a keen-eyed Zoe who ran up to her. "What's going on? Isn't Sebastian with you yesterday night?" Zoe whispered. "What's he doing over at Nova's Miss Timekeeper?" Zoe and Natalie were childhood friends who had grown up together. It was Zoe who pulled her back from the edge and introduced her to Sebastian a year ago. She had decided to stick around the television station afterwards to become an editor at the news department. Natalie shrugged with indifference. "I couldn't be bothered. I'd rather he dumps me." "Really? Have you given up on taking revenge? Where are you going to find another man like him?" Zoe rolled her eyes at Natalie. "Did you manage to find any leads?" Natalie was visibly disappointed as she shook her head. "None. But you know what kind of guy Sebastian is. If I were to be too obvious in trying to use him, I'd..." She then drew a finger across her own throat. Zoe frowned and spent a moment to think before she said, "Perhaps I should ask my dad. You've already done enough for me, Zoe." Natalie smiled as she held her friend by the hand. "I am no longer fearful as I've already made it through the toughest period. I just don't want to put you in a tough spot on my account." Worried about what Zoe might say next, Natalie spoke first. "Is the guest list out? Who should I be expecting? And let me know when you have the script ready." The two of them walked toward the office as she spoke. When Natalie noticed how unusually quiet Zoe was, she glanced over her shoulder at the latter. Her friend appeared conflicted. "Has someone on that list decided to skip out?" "It's not that." Zoe exhaled as she did not how best to put what was on her mind across to Natalie. "Why don't you take a day off? Those invitees aren't really high profile, so the audience won't mind even if you are not hosting." That got Natalie amused. "Why would I want to take a day off for no reason? I still need to keep up appearances for this job in case Sebastian decides that he has had enough of me." She placed her glass on the table before she said, "All right. Out with it. Seriously, you should take a break just for today," Zoe said as she started nudging her friend toward the exit. "We can go shopping together if you are bored." Natalie's sense of bewilderment grew by the minute. The more insistent Zoe was, the more suspicious she became. They were just out of the door when they bumped into another program anchor. "Good morning, Natalie," that colleague hailed. "I heard that Claude Neely will be making an appearance in your program. I am a big fan, but I've got a news segment to cover later. Do you think you could help me ask him for his autograph?" Claude. The name dropped like a sledgehammer upon her head. It made her face bloodless and her palms sweaty. Her colleague noticed her discomfort and asked cautiously, "Are you all right?" "Yeah. I think I might be low on sugar from skipping breakfast." Natalie counted her breaths and that helped her recover. "Sure thing. I can do that." "Awesome. Thanks, Natalie." After her colleague left, Zoe fronted Natalie. Claude signed on for a major production. He was shooting behind closed doors in South America for 6 months and only returned last week. Claude's a late addition on your show at the behest of his agent who called in this morning. I've only found out about that when I came in. Zoe's voice shrank as she spoke until she finally sighed. Look, Nat. I think you should just go back. This is my show. How could it do without my presence in it? Natalie flipped her hair as she flashed a dazzling smile. We should expect great ratings with the participation of this newly crowned Best Actor. Zoe was speechless. Anyone else who had not been close with Natalie for as long as Zoe did would have been convinced that Natalie had really moved on. Only she would know how profoundly Claude had hurt her best friend. Seeing the way she acted, there was not much else Zoe could say before she handed Natalie the file containing the script. Handle this however you deem fit. I am the show's anchor. Of course, the limelight has to be on me. Natalie pulled Zoe in and kissed her. Since Sebastian has a new squeeze, I doubt he'll be coming around tonight. I'll probably need you to help me with a takeout. Got it. Zoe shrugged her off and went off in the opposite direction. Natalie stood there until she disappeared from sight before she rescinded her smile. Her hands shivered as though the file she held weighed half a ton. She only came out of her stupor when the makeup artist rang her up. With the file in hand, she made for the dressing room. The makeup artist too happened to be a fan of Claude. She was excited to learn that he was on the guest list and could not stop talking about him as she was doing Natalie's face. Hopping around the topics of her effusive praise for Claude's star quality being made for the big screen. A commentary about his meteoric rise to fame. An observation of his low profile and squeaky clean image to his dedication to his craft. And finally, plaudits to his crowning as Best Actor for the performance in his second feature film. That mega fan just kept the reel rolling. Natalie obliged her with the occasional nod and words of affirmation while the script in her hands creased in her own ever-tightening grip. At 1:10, the 6 guests arrived in the studio. Owing to the presence of Claude, more than a few of the station staff had come forth to welcome him, resulting in congestion in the hallway. Natalie breathed in deeply and brought out her best smile as she stepped up to greet the incoming visitors. When she reached the front, a slim silhouette appeared in the corner of her eye. She instinctively retreated when a large hand reached over and enveloped hers. Natalie's mind went blank when she felt the slight coolness on the man's clean and slender hand. Her physiological responses were not a reaction to this reunion, but to her own inexplicable thoughts of Sebastian's face and the dryness inside his palms. Her thoughts about the man's peculiar quirks made her hips burn. All the eyes of the stunned onlookers were transfixed on Natalie and Claude when they saw him initiate contact with her and greet her so tenderly. Natalie noted how off-color her assistant's expression was and immediately banished those random musings from her mind. She confidently lifted her head to make eye contact with the man in front of her and curled her red lips into a slight smile. I must say that I am quite overwhelmed by this warm gesture from Mr. Neely. I've very much enjoyed your movies, so consider me a fan of yours. There was an inkling of excitement in Natalie's tone, as though she was standing in front of her idol. I never expected that you would be able to make time to grace my program with your presence right after being crowned Best Actor. It feels almost surreal that you're here. Natalie broke the ice with her clever words and had the onlookers quite entertained. Some of them went on to tease her. Then you really should see to it that you butter him up well. I am sure you'll stop feeling that wave once he starts to drop in more often. Of course. Natalie then took the opportunity to casually pull away from Claude. Never mind, Mr. Neely. It seems that you have a pretty packed schedule yourself. Mr. Sater. It took me a good many months to get you in here. So you're going to love all the forfeits I've got lined up for you. Mr. Sater smiled bitterly. You're really not going to go easy on me, are you, Nat? That's what friends are for. Wouldn't you agree? Natalie then instructed the makeup artist to lead Claude and the other guests to the dressing room while she attended to Mr. Sater personally. Those are what your fans have conceived specially for you. Bah! What fans? I think they are just eager to see me make a fool of myself. Natalie's body went on autopilot. Her nerves only started to calm after Claude was completely out of sight. The filming for the variety show started at 3 in the afternoon. All of the 6 guests were enjoying a good run at the moment. The effusive reception which they received from the fans in the studio was a reflection of their current level of popularity. When it came to Claude Neely's turn to step onto the stage, the rapturous cheers from the fans below threatened to bring the house down. Having spent a good 10 minutes in the washroom clearing her head, Natalie had transformed herself into the brilliant and unflappable show host she was known to be as she bantered and played games with her guests under the illumination of the bright spotlight. The recording for the 90-minute program was over in a jiffy. As they wrapped up, Natalie even won the commendation of the director. "Nat, you were absolutely on top of your game today. I heard that you are a fan of Claude's. Were you so focused because you didn't want to look bad in front of him?" "Of course," Natalie replied as she passed her own headset along to a member of the crew. "I'll be off to the dressing room. Director, these contacts are killing me." Natalie then exited the stage in a hurry. When she stepped into the dressing room and was about to call the makeup artist over, a figure squeezed in behind her and grabbed her by the hand. "This is the dressing room, Mr. Neely. There'll be people passing by often." Natalie twisted herself out of his grip and ribbed him. "You've just nabbed an award and is at the height of your popularity. I don't want to get on the wrong side of your agency by landing you in the tabloids." "Nat, let us just talk about this." Claude did not like women behaving this way. He spoke as he brought himself closer to her. "I thought about looking you up back then, but the agency had a job scheduled, so I had no choice but to head overseas for filming. Before I left, I sent a letter to your home, only to find out that it had been sent back when I returned." Natalie replied impassively. "It was coincidental that I moved away and changed my number. If there is nothing else, Mr. Neely, I'd like for you to leave as I need to remove my makeup." She made straight for the dressing counter and felt much more comfortable with her contact lenses removed. Claude followed her over. "I had my drink spiked and was entrapped by Sally. Later, I was lured to the hotel by her to do those things. I didn't know she took photos as well." He had his head in his hands and struggled to continue. "You know who her father is? My movie was premiering. I'll be finished if the photos were leaked then." Natalie did not appear to be listening as she got up to get something. The man lost control when he saw that he was repeatedly being ignored. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I've already broken up with Sally and also changed agencies, so her family cannot continue to threaten me. Let go." Natalie's voice went from soothing to frosty as she labored against his forceful embrace. "Let go of me, Claude Neely." When it appeared that he would not be relinquishing his grip on her, Natalie berated in protest. A tearing sound was heard amidst her struggling. Her dress slid off her shoulder as the strap on her dress gave way, exposing a considerable section of her snowy, translucent skin. That seemed to have brought Claude back to his senses as he finally released her from his arms. "I am sorry." Natalie's eyes darkened as she swiftly caught the falling fabric she still had on her and held it close. Without waiting for Claude to finish, she struck him across the face so hard that her hand became numb. "You disgust me, Claude." Meeting this man once more roused her dormant memories, and her lips quivered as she fought to contain the outpouring of her emotions. As she glowered at him, Natalie's words bled through gritted teeth. "How many times have I gone to Mr. Chavez? How many bottles had I drunk for him to grant you another audition for the lead role in that movie? But you, the only person you've ever thought about with those photos is your own damn self." It was just 1 year ago when she poured her heart and soul into their relationship, putting everything on the line for a future together with him. She had begged and pleaded with others to get him those job opportunities without the support of her own family. In fact, she had not even turned 22 when they were dating and had never even touched a drink before. Nevertheless, she went out and networked on his behalf, day after day, bottle after bottle, until the alcohol almost damaged her innards. She kept her faith in him even when she received those lewd photos from an unknown source. At that time, she had rejected 3 calls from her mother as she continued to wait patiently to hear an explanation from him. Regrettably, in the end, Claude fled overseas and left it to his agent to inform her of his decision to end their relationship. The news of her mother's suicide followed shortly after. The night when the love of her life left, Natalie held her mother's lifeless corpse and cried her heart out. When she drifted to the edge of the bridge in a bid to end her own life, it was Zoe who pulled her back and slapped her to her senses. "What reason have you to kill yourself?" Zoe's question was a good one. Natalie then thought to herself that since none of it was her fault, she had no justification for punishing herself for it. As she recalled these, her hatred for this man intensified. "Get out of my sight, Claude. I still have those photos of yours, so don't make me send them to the press." She had been upset enough to want to publicize the photos and ruin Claude's fledgling career back then, and would have done so had her heart not been softened by the remnants of the feelings she still harbored for him. What she did not expect was for him to still have the cheek to show his face around her again. "Nat, that was on me. You can scold me however you please," Claude said as he ran his tongue around the stinging on the corner of his lips. "I only seek your forgiveness." After a brief pause, he continued in a low voice. "I know that you have been with Sebastian Hoffman ever since we broke up. Is this how you intend to get back at me? Haven't the year that you've spent with him been enough of a comeuppance?" "A comeuppance?" She laughed. "What makes you think you are worth my effort?" "Huh?" Claude regarded her staidly. "I know that you still care for me, Nat. You would not have talked to other guests while avoiding me when we met just now. Please do not be mistaken, Mr. Neely. I was only making sure that the other guests were being attended to," Natalie stated plainly. "I chose to be with Sebastian. He is wealthy and good-looking. By being with him, I have everything to gain and nothing to lose." She arched her back as she leaned against the dressing table and then smiled sensually. "Only after knowing Mr. Hoffman did I understand what a real man should be like. He adores me and can give me anything I desire. But you, HMPH, you still need to depend on women." Hearing the name of another man hang on Natalie's lips left a bitter taste in Claude's mouth. "Sebastian is a businessman, Nat. He is only using you to make money for him. Whereas I still love you." Mr. Neely's accolades for his acting is surely well deserved. Look at how easily the word love rolls off his tongue. Natalie cut Claude off before she turned her head sharply to regard him. "Mr. Hoffman knows how to please me in bed, so I do love the way he uses me." When Claude saw the woman's lascivious conduct, he started to imagine her convulsing in throes of ecstasy beneath the torso of another man. His eyes burned with hostile intent and the veins on his arm pulsed as his fingers tightened against themselves. Natalie was not to be outdone as she matched his gaze with her own uncompromising brand of defiance. Just as the two of them were locked in a standoff, they were caught off guard by an untimely knock on the dressing room door. As Natalie was more concerned about the impossibility of accounting for Claude's presence in her dressing room than anything else, she forewent changing her clothes. She then proceeded to loosen up her expression and put on a smile before pulling back on the door handle. "Mr. Morgan." Natalie's heart jumped when she saw that it was Sebastian's personal assistant, Kirk Morgan, who was standing on the other side. She stepped outside swiftly and closed the door behind her to prevent him from seeing who was inside the dressing room. Natalie's movements were quick, but Kirk had already caught a glimpse of a man behind her as she was coming out. Besides, He had been lingering around long enough to catch part of the conversation between Claude and herself. With her crimson lips slightly parted, she asked bewitchingly, "What brought you here?" "Ivy brought you something, Miss Cook." Kirk noticed Natalie's suggestive body language, but he kept his head and passed the file he had in his hands along to her. "Mr. Hoffman wanted me to present this gift to you." Natalie opened the folder to find the paperwork for the standalone villa in the city center that she had mentioned to Sebastian previously. Wow! Such a generous present. Could this be a parting gift? Wow! I am really chuffed at this gift from Mr. Hoffman. Natalie signed off on the document with immediacy and fished out the sticky pad she always had with her. She then penned a personal note on it and stamped it with her own lips before slipping it inside the file. She smiled as she returned the signed paperwork to Kirk. "Please extend my thanks to Mr. Hoffman. I've seen the news this morning and believe Miss Snittle would be a better fit for him too." Kirk cursed under his breath when he almost got hooked by the captivating movements and saccharine enunciations of this sultry woman leaning against the door. "Will do, Miss Cook." "All right. See you." Natalie saw him off with a smile. After Kirk disappeared from view, Natalie wiped the inviting expression off her own face. She sneered when she turned back to eye the partially concealed dressing room briefly before leaving it in the dust. Thanks for listening to the Bravonovel audiobook. Welcome to download the Bravonovel app. Read the novel I Conquer the Conqueror online and get the latest updates. Please see the video introduction for the novel details page and app download address.